There are places in the Imperium where even the Adeptus Administratum dares not send its scribes, where ink dries to powder in the cold of silence, and records vanish beneath the weight of centuries unspoken. Among the shattered remnants of hive worlds and the desolate bones of shrines long since bled dry, there stand structures not marked on any star chart, convents, bastions not of stone alone, but of secrecy, sanctity, and scars burned into the warp echoes of forgotten wars. The Adepta Sororitas call them sanctuaries. The Inquisition calls them assets. The Ecclesiarchy calls them holy. But those who have passed to near-rogue traitors, penal legions, even loyalist, Astartes whisper, another name, graveyards that breathe in the shadows of these sacred walls. The silence is not emptiness. It is ritual. It is memory carved in blood. What happens inside cannot be scanned, cannot be decoded, and should not be spoken. But if you listen closely, beyond the canticles and hymns, beyond the hymnals of flame and fury, you might hear it, the low murmur of something older than doctrine. If this lore draws breath within you, if the silence speaks, then lend voice. Like, share, and subscribe to Carry the Light of the Emperor into the hidden places, and to walk with the Sororitas, where few return unchanged. They descended without names, only serials burned into their collars, and a number scrawled across the back of each rebreather. Binal Unit 647. Kappa. 6 men and 2 women, whose crimes ranged from cowardice to cannibalism. Shackled not by chains, but by the certainty that anything outside this mission was worse. The moon above Varela Secundus had split along its equator decades ago, and the tectonic afterbirth that followed left the surface stitched with quake scars and hollowed impact valleys. A week ago, a tremor exposed something beneath one of those scars, a vault mouth, carved in basilican stone, with the imperial aquila worn smooth by time and heat. The Adeptus Ministorum offered no explanation. Records during Van Dyer's age were always hazy, redacted, or deliberately false. But something in the upper echelons moved fast. Orders arrived. A transport was requisitioned. Unit 647 Kappa was dispatched within the day. No support, no retrieval window, no blessed right of entry. Just the words, breach, confirm, record, remain. Their descent began with silence, broken only by the cough of dust against their boots and the grating scream of servitor-drilled airlocks, forced open after centuries of stagnation. The heat was unnatural, not furnace hot, but womb warm, as if the stone itself retained body temperature. The first scent to reach them was not mold or rot but incense, still lingering, still burning. One of the troopers muttered a prayer, and another struck him for it. The corridors were carved cathedral-tight walls, covered in bas-reliefs of martyrdom. Most bore no faces. Where visages should have been, the stone was scrubbed smooth by blade or hand. The recon lead, Cern Vogt, paused before one Panellan emaciated woman impaled on a halberd of light, her expression erased. Her blood was rendered in crimson crystal that glittered beneath their lumen strips. Vogt reached out to test the texture. It was warm, moist. They pressed deeper. The first room they entered was the Chapel of Recollection. Benches of bronze and bone lined either side, angled toward a towering stained-glass triptych of Saint Delantha, the blind penitent. But her eyes were not closed. The glass shimmered, depicting a face far too modern, far too knowing. Blood ran down from the seams in the frame, not in torrents, not dramatic, just steady, weeping, as if the saint mourned without end. Trooper Merrick approached the altar. A servo-skull darted down from the vaulted ceiling, its optics flaring red. The skull should have been long dead, its sacristan protocols obsolete. But it scanned him, whispered something, static-laced, ancient, low Gothic, half-coded. The machine tried to anoint him. He shot it in panic. The gunshot didn't echo. It folded inward, like sound smothered by velvet. The others drew weapons without command. Vogt raised a hand. Wait. Listen. There it was. A low hymn, echoing backward. Melodic, feminine, yet spoken in reverse syllables that slipped beneath cognition like fish through fingers. The vox links in their helmets flickered. Some of the feed carried the hymn. Some of it repeated their own breathing, but a second too late. Private Kellen vomited. The vomit was black. It hissed when it touched the stone. At the center of the room stood an auto altar, a mechanism of liturgical motion, rosary wheels, wax-fed burners, scripture prince pools, and flensing knives all arranged in a spiral of devotion. It should not have been running. It was. The incense was fresh. The wax was warm. The prayers printed in strips of parchment still curled from its spine. One strip flitted loose, landing on Trooper Alira's boot. She picked it up. The ink bled into her skin. She didn't scream. She just stood, blinking, mouthing a name she never had. Vogt ordered a fallback to the surface. None of the comes worked. The ascent routes were gone, not collapsed. They stood where the staircase had been and found only smooth stone. One trooper tested it, fired a flare round. The flare embedded and pulsed inside the stone, like muscle swallowing bone. They regrouped, began marking their path. Blood from palms, slashes on the walls, scraps of torn uniform. But the marks didn't hold. When they circled back, the stone bore only scripture. Blessed are the veiled, for they see not the sin they inherit. It was Alira who broke first. She stopped responding to her name, responding only to liturgical titles from the old Schola, Progenium, Hymn. She began cataloging their sins aloud, not accusations. Each man and woman heard their deepest shames, spoken in her voice. Vogt struck her once, hard. She bled from the nose. The blood ran upward, along the ceiling, and vanished into the glass of St. Delantha. Her eyes closed at last. Private Merrick found a reliquary room. Inside were rows of ossified hands, each gripping a blade, or a page, or a vial. None were labeled. One hand gripped what looked like a burnt data slate, its surface scorched. He pried it free. The hand twitched, not a spasm, a grasp. He dropped the slate. It split open, revealing not code, but a heartbeat, audible throbbing, echoing behind their eyes. By the 4th hour, 3 had gone silent. Not dead, just unresponsive, sitting in pews, mouthing hymns that didn't match any catechism. One of them, Kellen, began removing his armor, piece by piece. Beneath it, the skin was marked, not wounds, not tattoos, writings, black script shaped like lashes, crawling up his ribs. Vogt tried one last signal flare. Nothing responded. No tremors, no seismic shift, just stillness. He sat down at the altar. He didn't kneel, just watched the wax melt in time with his breath. He wondered, not for the first time, why the chapel was built underground, not hidden, not buried, grown. The stained glass saints had shifted. Delantha now looked like Alira. Another pane bore Vogt's own face, size gouged, hands nailed. The final pane showed nothing, just a shroud. Waiting, he didn't speak, but the glass responded. It cracked, slowly, reverently. She was born without a name, or if she had one, it had been taken long before her first breath within the convent walls. No one spoke in the halls of the martyred Vale. No one had spoken for generations, not because of silence imposed by doctrine, but because voice was considered too soft, too free, too Here, only blood remembered. Only scars spoke. The girl, barefoot, shaven, faceless behind the bone-white mask of all postulants, knelt before the veil. It was not cloth. It was not metaphor. The veil hung from the highest spire, woven from the skinned palms of those who had taken their final oaths. It shimmered slightly, not with light, but with the memory of touch, millions of fingerprints, all compressed into one sacred tapestry. When she placed her own hand against it, the skin on her palm split in precise lines she did not understand. and blood trickled down her wrist, like tears descending a statue's cheek. Behind her, the sisters sang, not with mouths, but with their backs scarified ridges, on each vertebrae forming a hymn etched in flesh. When they turned during procession, their spines shimmered with psalmic calligraphy. She could not read it, but she felt its cadence in her marrow. Her trial had lasted 88 days. That number was not symbolic. It was anatomical. 88 is the number of primary pain nerves restructured by the convent's ministrations, each one rewired not for punishment, but for memory. On the 33rd day, she lost her name to a ritual tongue removal. On the 65th, she was laid beneath the lithic lector, a slab etched with scriptural verses in reverse raised relief. Each time she shifted, the scripture dug deeper. By the end, her back read like the Book of Suffering. Volume 3. Now kneeling, her body remembered what her tongue could no longer say. Flashbacks didn't arrive visually. They came through texture. The cold of the steel wash basins, where she cleaned her wounds. The wet press of sanctified cloths against joints forced into prostration. The taste of iron not from injury, but from the cup of silence, a chalice filled with water steeped in rusted purity seals. She had been watched always, not by eyes, by relics. The convent housed hundreds, jawbones of martyrs, teeth of sainted preachers, a single lung still breathing within its reliquary, fogging its glass once every hour. And at the center, the mouthless skull of Sister Haggai, whose death cry, it was said, had killed 5 heretics by severing their thoughts mid-blasphemy. The initiate's body bore each stage of her indoctrination, a diagonal scar across the left thigh made during the flensing prayer, a round burn above the navel where the brand of silence was pressed without scream, 3 lashes along the spine, corrective, not punitive, administered when she hesitated to place her hand into the box of thorns. She had not removed it until it closed around her wrist. She had not bled until hours later. On the day of final vow, no ceremony was held. No witnesses stood. She entered the sanctum ossus, where the bones of prior sisters were arranged not by date, but by resonance. The air vibrated. Each bone hummed with stored litany. She was to lie between 2 femurs, one belonging to a sister who had died in penitence, the other in vengeance. Their resonance would choose her path. As she lay down, the scars on her shoulder reopened. Not violently, just enough to whisper. Not air escaped, but sound. Her own heartbeat, slowed, began to match a rhythm that was not hers. From above, scripture descended, not physically, but through the floor, the stone itself pressing ideas into her skull, into her stomach, into the deepest part of her, where thought still dared to wander. The vow itself was not a phrase. It was a cut, a single line, drawn across the ribcage with a blade carved from the tooth of a traitor, priest. The wound was shallow, but it never healed. This was the vow, to carry doctrine beneath the skin, forever vulnerable, forever unread by the unworthy. When she stood, her mask cracked, not from pressure, from release. Her face had aged, though only hours had passed. Her lips were sealed shut with gold filament, each thread woven through sacred piercings installed in infancy. Her eyes bled. Her breath smelled of ash and anointing oil. She was not human in any recoverable way. Her first act as a full sister was not recorded. It could not be, but the bones in the sanctum shifted afterward. The reliquaries went silent for 40 days. The lungs stopped breathing. Some say the convent itself darkened, as if the sun refused to shine on walls that now carried something unbearable. And yet, she walked. Each footfall bled slightly, as the soles of her feet had been engraved with canticles, words that must never be spoken, only endured. Every step was a sermon. Every breath was a confession. Some in the wider Imperium imagine the Sororitas as warriors first, but those who know, those who have seen the inside of a martyred veil, convent, understand otherwise. Their war begins where language ends. Their purity is not metaphor, it is literal. They carve sin out with hooks and cauterize the wound with prayers too old for speech. She would go on to fight, to burn, to lead, but none of those moments would define her. Only this vow, only this wound that never closed. Confessor Aramon Thal had seen prophecy before, in battlefield tongues mangled by blood loss, in the wide eyes of orphans who'd seen angels descend through ash, in Voxgrain recordings left behind in the aftermath of Exterminatus, where a single phrase would repeat 38 times before cutting to silence. But this was different. The Ordo Ministorum file had come sealed beneath 3 purity seals, each countersigned by a different segment of the Adepta Sororitas. That in itself was unusual. Orders from the Sororitas rarely passed upward. They were enforcers, not petitioners. The dossier mentioned a convent beneath Hive Salenthus Delta, long presumed collapsed during the Asius riots. The coordinates matched no current registries. No satellite images showed a structure, but beneath 100 meters of cindered ruin, a Voxbing had flared broadcasting a hymn in a dialect unrecognized by any current. Ecclesiarchal index, the voice was female, not old, not young, screaming, not in agony, in rhythm. When Thal arrived, the descent felt like sinking into a lung that had never exhaled. Each level of the ruin groaned, as if resentful of intrusion. The air was pressurized, artificial. The walls bore no iconography, only indentations, like ribs along a throat that had swallowed something far too large. He found the chamber without a guide. The singing led him. Each syllable etched itself into the inside of his skull, not heard, but remembered, as if he'd always known the hymn but had never dared speak it. The room was circular, black stone, veined with veins of dormant gold that pulsed when he stepped over the threshold. At its center stood a column of glass, 10 meters tall, etched with unknown litanies and concentric spirals. Inside floated a woman, naked, hair long enough to wrap her ankles, drifting in the fluid that glowed not with light, but with recollection. He remembered the scent of burned myrrh, though he hadn't smelled it in decades. Her mouth was open. She did not scream aloud. The glass suppressed it, but he could feel it, inside his lungs, behind his teeth. He approached, and the glass did not reflect him. It showed a younger man, himself, perhaps, but not quite. The mouth within the tube moved, again, and he staggered. She was speaking in perfect sync with the words he'd muttered during his last nightmare. A dream of fire descending, of wings wrapped in chains, of a planet with no stars above it. He hadn't told anyone, not even his confessor. Her eyes opened. They were not blank. They were full of mourning, not for him, for something older. The files said she had been entombed centuries ago, a minor saint, barely canonized. Saint Redra, the veiled shriek, born mute, martyred at 17, burned alive while preaching a sermon she had never written. The records said her voice was found still echoing days after her death, stitched into the dreams of the sisters who had carried her ashes. Her relics had vanished, until now. Thal placed a hand against the glass. It was warm, not artifact warm, body warm. He recited a verification prayer, a standard 9-verse invocation of St. Drusilla's lineage. The saint in the glass responded with a hymn that mirrored his own voice, not an echo, an anticipation. She screamed again, though no sound reached his ears. His teeth ached. His gums bled slightly. He requested Vox relay. It failed. The silence inside the chamber was total, not passive, hungry. He turned to leave, found the door gone, the walls seamless, the glass pulsed. In his desperation, he recited the full rite of sanctified clarity, a forbidden litany reserved for uncovering false prophets. It usually burned through deception, laid illusions bare. This time, it triggered a response. The fluid around St. Redra shifted, her arms uncurled, her mouth stopped moving, her eyes locked on his. He couldn't breathe, not for lack of air but because his breath no longer belonged to him. He saw visions, not sent, but pulled, extracted from his own memory and shown back in twisted form. His first sermon, delivered in a crumbling chapel, now spoken by a congregation of eyeless children. His ordination, reversed the oil scraped from his brow instead of applied. His sins, magnified, then beautified. He realized then, she wasn't prophesying. She was remembering him. The screams weren't warning. They were mimicry. He fell. Blood from his nose, ears, and fingertips. The floor accepted it, absorbed it. Glowed slightly. The saint drifted closer to the inner surface of the tube. Her palm met his, glass between them. He felt heat, pressure, and then something deeper, recognition. Not divine, personal. His dreams that night would be indistinguishable from waking. He would see her walking the halls of the convent, speaking in his voice, preaching sermons only he had memorized. And in each vision, he stood watching, voiceless. When he finally returned to the surface, 2 days had passed. He bore no wounds, but the vox recorders on his armor had been overwritten, not corrupted, rewritten. Sermons in a dialect still unrecognized. He no longer slept. He no longer preached. He no longer used his name. Only one word remained, echoing in his throat when no one else was near. Redra, the Order of the Blinding Ash, made no proclamations. Their convent did not appear on any star map, tactical survey, or ecclesiarchal registry. Yet the records showed tithe payments submitted on time, logged from relay stations and systems abandoned since the age of apostasy. No transmissions, no sermons, no requests. But weapons, it was said, had emerged from their halls carried by unnamed sisters in blackened armor, wielding flame that did not burn, blades that unspooled into symbols mid-swing, and relics that glowed with heat but produced no light. Rumors swelled until they reached the desks of the Ordo Hereticus. The Inquisition dispatched a retinue, not a strike team, not an interrogation unit, a delegation: 3 inquisitorial agents, a Mechanicus Magos, and a Lexico-Arcanist from the Scholastius. Their mandate was observation, documentation, requisition, if deemed safe. When they arrived, they found no gates, only a threshold of scorched earth atop a plateau surrounded by volcanic glass. No banners, no bastions, just a single arch of fused bone rising from the rock, humming faintly in the key of sanctity. The convent emerged behind it as they crossed, as if perception itself had been rewired by proximity, an architecture not built to be seen, but to exist only under deliberate gaze. The sisters did not greet them. They stood at intervals, motionless, helmeted, bearing nothing in their hands. Their presence pressed into the mind like a hot brand laid on thought. The Lexico-Arcanist, Sovolkair, tried to speak. He forgot his own language mid-sentence. The words folded into themselves. He vomited blood. The Magos clicked in irritation, his mechadendrites stiffening in defensive curl. They were led without word, through hallways lined in basalt blackened by unknown flame. Every surface exhaled warmth, not residual, not mechanical, but alive, as if the stones remembered fire. The vault was beneath the chapel. The chapel bore no altar, only a pit, ringed with relics too melted to identify. Down a spiral carved from a single sheet of seamless obsidian, the vault of silent fire waited. The doors had no seams, no hinges, no markings, but they opened when the canoness placed her palm upon them. Her gauntlet hissed, melted slightly. She did not react. She did not speak. She did not enter. Inside, there was no torch, no lumen, no heat vent or power source. Yet the room pulsed with thermal presence. It wasn't lightless, only indescribably dim, as though illumination had become shy. Shadows refused to align with logic. Angles didn't hold. The first weapon they were shown was a censer, Simple, iron, suspended by 3 chains. It swung slowly, on no wind. Smoke curled from it, but the smoke did not rise. It sank. The inquisitorial adept, von Mieris, leaned forward to examine the chains. He did not scream. He did not fall. He simply vanished. His scent lingered. Nothing else. The Mago stepped forward, mechadendrites chirping, scanning, weaving in ceremonial arcs. One appendage brushed the smoke. It crystallized instantly. Not the appendage, the air around it. Ice patterns in the shape of cathedral windows bloomed mid-air and shattered in silence. Inquisitor Morethi ordered retreat. The Cananus did not move. Behind her, the other sisters knelt not to pray, but to conduct. The vault responded. The heat deepened, not oppressive, intimate, like breath on the back of the neck. The second object was a book, closed, bound in unmarked hide. No clasp, no lock, but it radiated memory. The lexico-arcanist fell to his knees before it. Not reverence, recognition. He began to glow, not luminescence. Internal combustion. His skin cracked, light poured through. His voice, when he spoke, was not his own. The flame remembers. It does not warm. It does not destroy. It rewrites. The canonist reached forward and closed his eyes with 2 fingers. The glow ceased. He collapsed, still breathing. Changed. His mouth moved silently, reciting litanies in a language no one else knew. Later, when scanned, his blood bore scripture. Whole verses of the Book of Cleansing, encoded in protein strands. Inquisitor Moretha asked again, "What is the source?" The canoness answered. Not aloud. She turned, and her armor parted along the breastplate, not split, not opened, but peeled. Beneath it was no skin, only coal. Living, her heart pulsed ember orange, veins of glass spiraling from it like the branches of a burned tree. She was not human. She was sanctified. The sisters behind her stood. Each removed their gauntlets. No hands, only cinders in the shape of purpose. This was the vault's gift. Not weapons, but state-silent fire. Faith that consumed identity and replaced it with liturgical thermodynamics. A theology of combustion. Scripture burned directly into flesh. Heat as memory. Devotion as radiation. The Inquisitor tried to withdraw. Her voice trembled. She no longer remembered her ship's name. The canoness extended her hand. Not invitation, instruction, and behind her, the vault's fire pulsed again. Shrine World Ephron IV had been reduced to vitrified ruin. Glass fields stretched to the horizon like the preserved exhale of a dying god. The orbital bombardment had not been strategic. It had been erasure. Nothing moved across the crust. No vegetation, no biosignatures, no Vox signals. And yet, beneath the southern ridge of the planet's equatorial fracture, a convent remained unaffected, not buried, not shielded, simply untouched. A recon servitor, dispatched by orbital command, recorded the first anomaly, singing. No vibration in the air, no atmospheric oscillation, just a chorus recorded across multiple audio bands, layered in parallel, frequencies harmonic and dissonant in alternating intervals. The singing persisted for 6 hours before the servitor collapsed, its black box overloaded with translinguistic data. Its last transmitted image showed a circle of veiled sisters, robes intact, armor unburned, seated in ash, as though in prayer. Their mouths were gone, not sealed, not scarred, absent, smooth flesh from chin to nose. The Ordo Xenos intervened. A cryptolinguist was deployed. His name was Dr. Alphys Gray, master of over 400 dialects, including extinct Martian script logic and several pre-imperial Terra trade tongues. He wore a cipher pendant, blessed by 6 saint scribes, and bore an artificial occipital, cortex for real-time translation. He arrived in silence. The sisters did not acknowledge him. They continued to sing. It was not song as understood by audiophiles or choral scholars. The sound bypassed auditory logic. It entered thought first, bypassing the ear. Each tone carried semantic weight without syllables. Ideas arrived whole, like cathedral spires dropped onto a plain. He began transcription, not on parchment, nor data. The words would not hold. When he tried to record phonetically, the symbols rewrote themselves. One rune bled into the next, until the paper folded inward, like scorched vellum. He tried vocal repetition. His throat locked. 4 hours, he rasped, until blood rose through his teeth, so he listened. And slowly, understanding came, not linguistically, anatomically. He awoke one morning with ink on his palms. Black oily script, where fingerprints had once lived. Not written, extruded. A sister stood over him, face obscured by veil, hands extended. Her palms bled ink as well. The same script. He reached forward. She touched him. The ink moved, transferred, divided, absorbed. He wept, not from pain. From clarity. Each day, he forgot something. His rank, his birth, the name of his teacher at the Schola Linguistica, then his own name. He recorded his thoughts obsessively, but the records degraded faster than they were made. Files became static. Physical notes curled into patterns matching the sister's palms. He no longer felt the passage of time. He stopped requesting exfiltration. He no longer recognized the symbol of the Inquisition on his chest. He believed it was decorative. The singing deepened. More sisters emerged from the ash. Not from tunnels. Not from hidden They simply stood, rising in intervals like blooming organs from scorched ground. All bore the same absent mouths. All sang with the same tone. Eventually, he joined them. Not ceremonially, not willingly. He simply stood among them one morning, palms out, robe torn, face slack. He did not remember walking there. His lips were still present, but they no longer opened. He sang. The sound emerged from between his ribs. The ink spread beyond his palms, across his chest, along the curve of his spine. Each line pulsed with rhythm. The script changed, depending on proximity. He realized, dimly, that it was not fixed language. It reacted to witness. Whoever read it saw a different verse. The sisters did not seem to age. One bore the armor pattern of a pre-M 36 order. Another wore bone clasps of a design band during the age of apostasy. Time did not move within the choir. It nested, and the sound, though still voiceless, began to affect the air. The ash lifted and held form. Lattice patterns in the shape of symbols, long outlawed by the Ordo Chronos. Words that could not be spoken, sculpted in soot and memory. He no longer remembered what it meant to join. The choir did not offer conversion. It did not evangelize. It absorbed. Others came. A second analysis team. A third. None returned. Each added new tones. Variations in pitch. Expansions in harmony. One sister, ancient eyes sealed shut with gold, thread extended her hands to the new arrivals. Each time, the palms bled fresh script. And always, the newcomers bled in kind, until even that pattern broke. One day, no new sisters appeared. The ash did not stir, but the song changed. A new harmony entered the layered resonance. A melody neither sacred nor profane, but intimate, personal, recognizable. Gray's voice, a memory he hadn't recalled in decades. His mother humming before the lights went. Out in the scholars' dormitory, on Vordro Station, a song only he had known now, part of the choir. The ink on his skin pulsed, and something beneath the ash began to stir. Not a shape, not a structure, a mouth, not metaphorical. It yawned, not with hunger, with welcome. He stepped forward. Canoness Murata Velith did not fear relics. She bore them like wounds, intimidly, reverently, without awe. Her armor, blackened ceramite, laced with scorched gold inlays, had belonged to a martyr who bled to death while preaching through a vox grill fused shut by flame. Her bolt pistol had jammed during the scouring of Chelly's Prime, where she crushed a heretic's skull with its hilt rather than discard it. She did not seek prophecy. She sought repetition, victory through repetition, precision through pain. But the reliquary beneath Ophelia VII did not house symbols of the past. It entombed artifacts that did not belong to any timeline the Imperium recognized. The vault itself was not charted. She had found it through a fragment in a burned catechism, one line, in corrupted ink, buried between verses, referencing the steel that mourns beneath the seventh wound of the throne. 7 days of fasting, 7 nights of prayer, and then a quake beneath the southern transept, stone cracked, not with violence, but with acceptance, like a seal that had waited for its sign. She descended alone. None followed. The steps were too thin for armor. She left the warplate behind. The air grew warmer, not in temperature, but in tone, like a cathedral, filling with breath before the first note of song. The door at the end was shaped like a blade's crossguard. It did not open. It simply ceased to be. Inside, one item, a sword, cradled in bone, floating above a plinth carved in the language of sleep. It pulsed, faintly, with sound inaudible, yet unmistakable. Not power field crackle, not plasma hum, a keening, gentle, grieving. She reached for it. Her hand bled before contact, not from injury, from recognition. The moment her fingers closed around the hilt, her spine locked, her breath halted. Her eyes did not roll back. They froze. And then came the voice, not external, not psychic. The sword sang, not words, not doctrine, verses, epics, entire battles condensed into rhythm and silence. She saw a war unfold across a world she had never known, a desert planet where sisters fought in robes of copper and fire, wielding him guns and flame that curved like script. She saw a canoness fall with a lance through her ribs, not in defeat, but in punctuation. She blinked. The vault was gone. She stood in the cathedral above, clothed again in armor, sword in hand. Days had passed. The blade had no name, no markings, no known power source. When drawn, it vibrated not with threat, but with remembrance. It did not cut cleanly. Each swing tore the air like fabric, leaving syllables behind burned into stone, into armor, into flesh. The syllables never repeated. Lex mechanics could not translate them. Linguists wept trying. On her next deployment, Murata drew it against a demon engine that had crushed 3 hospitalers beneath its claws. The blade struck once. The machine paused not from damage, but from disorientation. It recoiled, as if recognizing something it feared, and then it collapsed, venting ichor from apertures that hadn't been touched. The blade sang again. This time, she saw a space battle. Sisters of battle on the hull of a void ship, leaping between boarding corridors. Their armor bore symbols never sanctioned by the Ecclesiarchy. One sister bore wings of bronze, another wept promethium. None of it had happened. None of it could happen, unless it had elsewhere. Else when the blade did not warn. It remembered each battle, each swing, each kill. It sang of events without origin, wounds carved into timelines that had bled out before recording. It grew heavier, not physically. In spirit, Murata began to forget the sequence of her own campaigns. She could not recall which scars were hers, and which belonged to the visions. She heard voices at night, not in dreams, but between breaths. Tactical orders spoken in dead dialects. Names she had never read, but mourned as if she'd buried them. The Inquisition sent an observer. He watched her spar with the blade. After 1 hour, he shot himself in the temple. He left no note. Only a word scratched into the wall with a fingernail, returned. The blade was not prophecy. It was not artifact. It was memory displaced events, without anchor, seeking voice. The sisters began to listen. Not all could endure it. One sister lit herself on fire after hearing a lullaby from a mother she had never had. Another fell to her knees mid-mission, sobbing apologies in an unknown tongue. She was later found dead, her throat filled with rose petals. The Ecclesiarchy tried to reclaim the weapon. They sent a delegation. They did not return. Only their rosaries were found hung in deliberate intervals along the nave, each one humming faintly, singing, if one listened close enough. Marata no longer spoke. Her mouth remained closed for months. She communicated only through the blade, in combat, in ritual. And when she slept, the sword slept beside her, always humming, always grieving, not for the dead, but for the forgotten. The ceiling of the nave cracked just before vespers. A hairline fracture split the stone above the pulpit, spiderwebbing through 3 archangels carved in basalt. Dust fell on the altar cloth. No tremor had preceded it. No stress reading had warned of subsidence. And yet, the fracture pulsed with heat, not of fire, but of breath. Sister Superior Kayla Verrett was tasked with the inspection. The canoness would not descend. She spoke of the lower foundations as not yet exercised, a term the younger sisters misunderstood as metaphor. Kayla knew better. She had been raised in this convent, suckled on stone prayers and oaths steeped in ash. There were things you did not approach casually. You asked permission. You bled before passage. The passage beneath the altar was not mapped. The blueprints of the convent ended 3 floors too high. Kayla brought a single lumen torch and a ceremonial blade. Her armor bore only the breastplate and vambresses light enough for descent, but sufficient for rites. The stairs spiraled in ways that challenged geometry. Steps flattened, widened, narrowed, then turned inward like vertebrae. Her torch began to flicker not dim, but confused, bending its glow sideways, as if repelled by what lay ahead. The air was thick, not with dust or age, with expectation. She found the cavity beneath the apse, a hollow chamber shaped like a womb, carved from smooth black stone. No scripture, no relics, no light. At its center, a slab of bone-colored marble, cracked through its middle. Beneath it, a shaped bones dot laid in rest, curled, limbs drawn tight, a skeleton, adult-sized, encased in mineral deposits like a fossil but breathing, not shallow, not gasping, steady, lungs rising with practiced cadence. The rib cage did not creak. The jaw did not move, but the sternum lifted and fell in perfect rhythm. Kayla fell to her knees, not in reverence, in something older, something that lived beneath worship. She did not cry, but moisture beaded on her cheeks, drawn not from eyes, but from skin itself sweating faith. She reached forward. Her hand hovered above the breastbone. The air shimmered. Her own chest ached. Her ribs pulled inward. She gasped and collapsed. Visions followed. Not images, not prophecy. Memory borrowed. She saw the construction of the convent. Workers without tongues carving the foundation stones with finger blood. A figure clad in bandages, not robes, guiding them. No face, no name, just a presence. She saw a birthing, not biological, architectural. The altar stones being lowered over a pit lined with placenticac moss. Sisters chanting without mouths. One woman screaming as her womb was cut not to remove a child, but to place something inside. She saw the mother, not divine, not monstrous, something in between. A thing that once bore humanity like armor, now hollowed and full of purpose beyond flesh. Kayla woke. Her torch was dead. The light came from the bones, now subtle phosphorescence emanating from the marrow. Lines of script etched across the ribs, blooming anew with every breath. She placed her hand upon the sternum. It was warm. The bones shuddered. A hum filled the chamber. Not external. Inside her chest. Her heart slowed. Her breath aligned. Her blood recited things her brain could not translate. A sound. Behind her. She turned. Another sister stood in the entryway. Young, unarmored, wide-eyed. "What did you find?" the girl asked. Kayla opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, her hand lifted, palm upward, fingers outstretched. The girl approached, slowly, step by step. She knelt, placed her palm against Kayla's. Ink rose from both the same script. They looked down. The bones beneath the altar had shifted, slightly, enough to form a cradle. The girl wept. Kayla did not. She finally understood. The convent was not built upon a tomb. It was built upon a womb. The mother did not die. She rested. Gested. Every sister who had ever knelt before the altar had contributed, not metaphorically. Something passed, through blood, through breath, through scar, and now the birth would begin again. Not of flesh, not of creature of purpose. A sister born without past, without name, without individuality. A vessel. Kayla stood, her back straightened with unnatural calm. The marrow in her bones ached, as if preparing to open. The girl behind her whispered a prayer, or maybe a plea, but Kayla knew it was too late for words. They would return to the surface together, but they would not be the same. The altar would not crack again. It would dilate. They came from the void paths, in caravans of rust, on hulls held together by litanies and scar tissue. Pilgrims from 100 minor worlds, fractured hive spires, collapse wards, agramoons too weathered for orbital mapping. The destination was always the same, a convent at the lip of Segmentum Pacificus, carved into the obsidian cliffs of Eurenthus Prime. There, above a chasm that had never echoed, burned a flame that did not die. It had no wick, no fuel, no source. It hovered just above the altar, flickering in place, casting no shadow, emanating no heat. It had burned for 2,000 years, not symbolically, literally. The fire had never dimmed, never faltered. Not once since the original canoness knelt beside it and plucked her own eyes from her skull to offer in its glow. The pilgrims believed it was a shard of the Emperor's wrath, stolen from the last furnace of Terra's founding forges. Others said it was the condensed final breath of Saint Hisela, crystallized in fire by the warp itself before martyrdom. The truth didn't matter. It was sacred because it endured. Until now, the flame began to flicker. It was subtle, minute oscillations. The kind of shift one feels, not sees. Those who stood closest claimed they saw it shiver, like a candle shamed by wind. One sister collapsed mid. Her mouth moved in perfect synchrony with the next sister's psalm, but her voice spoke backward. Words reversed. Names disassembled. Meaning folded. At first it was dismissed as exhaustion. Pilgrimage was a cruel journey. But then another sister fell. Then a third. Each one uttered prayers in dialects, not their own. One recited an oath from the Order of the Ebon Chalice, though she had never left Europe. Another whispered prophecies, sealed by the Inquisition, under threat of termination. Her eyes bled ink. The canoness ordered isolation. The flame was to be surrounded, guarded. The faithful were redirected to upper tiers. Incense was burned. Benedictions were tripled. It did not help. The flame dimmed further. Sister Panethea, the youngest of the choir, stared at it for 3 days without food. On the 4th day, she screamed a vow that had never been taught in the convent schola, not written, not codified. And then she fell silent, not unconscious, just silent. Her breath no longer moved, but her chest rose and fell. She walked into the sanctuary that night and knelt. No one stopped her. The flame grew brighter for 1 second, then sputtered, then resumed, dimmer than before. No one approached after that. A theologian was summoned, a lexicographer of sacred symbols. He arrived without companions. The sisters refused to let him speak, not out of disrespect but fear. Speech seemed to awaken something in the flame. He conducted his analysis in silence, sketching the flame's rhythm. It pulsed not with energy, but with cadence, a pattern, and then it stopped, just for a moment. He vomited blood, wrote one phrase in his own vomit, before collapsing. "It is not ours." The canoness gathered the remaining choir. She ordered the lament canticle sung not to the emperor, but to the flame itself. They begged it to stay. They wept in harmony. A sister offered her tongue, slicing it on a sacramental shard and feeding it to the ember, with bare hands. The flame turned blue, then white dot, then clear. It vanished, but the heat remained. Every surface in the sanctuary was warm. The sister's breath steamed, despite the temperature. The chapel's walls glistened with condensation, as though weeping. One sister fell forward in convulsion, and rose, speaking an oath, last heard on Kazar, during the siege of faithless blood. The canoness realized the truth. The flame had never belonged to them. It had never burned for the convent. It had only been Houseda, borrowed fire. Now, it sought elsewhere, and it began within the sisters themselves. Each of them, those who had knelt near it, prayed to it, bled beside it, now bore signs of combustion, not burns, not lesions, internal heat, sweat that boiled, eyes that shimmered like coal under pressure. They began to speak in tongues that didn't exist, not glossolia. Remembrance. Flame remembered differently than flesh. It carried memory as temperature. It moved between hosts, looking for continuity. One sister burst into flame during prayer, not screaming, not writhing, still kneeling, palms upward, a candle consuming its own wick. The fire did not hurt her. She simply ceased to be flesh. What was left sang without voice. The pilgrims returned, drawn not by doctrine now, but by instinct. They felt the absence, and they gathered at the sanctuary not to worship but to offer. One man opened his chest with a serrated bone. No scream, just light. The fire had left the altar. It walked now. Inhabitants. Host Sister Panethea smiled. Her mouth was gone, but the smile remained. She turned toward the chasm, and the flame, once anchored to stone, now flickered behind her eyes. The feast of Saint Aspera was meant to be a day of purgation, a day when the order of the severed grief renounced pride, gathered their sins like thorns, and offered them to fire. The convent's vaulted refectory, normally austere, was draped with black and crimson shrouds. Relics of martyrdom lined the walls, their reliquaries opened to the air so that the sisters could breathe the scent of their dead. Above the altar hung the banner of Aspera herself, white at the edges, but scorched to gray where her chains had been. In this silence of ritual, every sister repentia knelt, bearing their scars to the emperor's gaze, waiting for the confession rites to end in the sound of lashes. No one expected a voice. It began as a murmur, no louder than a prayer behind teeth. Sister Repentia Len, youngest of the penitent, head shaved to raw scalp, began to move her lips. At first it sounded like Latin Imperial muttered out of secret fragments of the exhortations of pain. Then the pitch shifted, deeper, older. The words resolved into a cadence no one had heard in centuries, not spoken for centuries. Yet every sister knew it. The voice of Canoness Vera. Caltris Vera had been burned alive by her own order for defection during the siege of Noxhaven. Her name had been struck from every hymnal, her face erased from all icons. Only whispered stories remained of her defiance, how she had led 100 sisters into the warp without sanction, and how they had never returned. The punishment had been meant to be absolute. Her voice was supposed to have died with her body, yet here it was, flowing from Ellen's mouth. The canoness presiding over the feast froze. The lashes hung in midair, voxlinks across the convent, long deactivated for penance season, flickered. Dead channels burst into life. Ellen's voice not, her own rolled through them, echoing in dormitories, chapels, and cloisters. It wasn't broadcast. It inhabited the circuits, like heat through a blade dot. At first, the sisters thought it was possession. They reached for purgation rites. But then the surveillance feeds began to distort. Auspex lenses fuzzed. Servoskulls crashed to the floor, optics bleeding data like pus. The footage didn't black out. It rewound, erased, rewound again. Each time the image of Elin flickered, another figure appeared behind her thin, tall, veiled Vera. The convent began sealing itself off. Bulkhead gates clanged shut. Vox jammers activated. Sacred seals were drawn across every ingress with burning oils. But the voice didn't stop. It grew steadier, louder. It began speaking names. Not the names of current sisters. Names from centuries ago. Roster rolls, birth cryptonyms, syntitles. The dead were being called as though for assembly sister. Ellen's eyes rolled back. Her mouth moved faster than breath allowed. Blood trickled from her ears. She laughed at not in her voice. In Vera's, it was the sound of iron striking water. The canoness knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Who speaks?" she demanded. Ellen's head snapped forward. Her mouth opened wider than bone should permit, and the answer came not as speech, but as echo dozens of Veras layered atop each other. Like a hall of mirrors collapsing. "I never left," said the voice. "You carried me. Every vow, you whispered. Every scar you took. Every lash you raised in my name. I walked." The sister superior at the gate swore she saw footprints appear in the ash of the refectory floor, though no one moved. The prints burned white-hot, then cooled to black. One set, moving toward the altar. No body attached. Just prints. Ellen convulsed. Her skin patterned with letters burning script in the dialect of the pre-apostasy. One line seared across her sternum, visible even through the penitential scars. A voice survives, what flesh cannot. The canoness commanded exorcism. Two sisters advanced with scent. The flames went out, not snuffed, absorbed. The air grew heavy, breath condensed. Words formed in vapor, hanging like banners above the altar. A single phrase, repeated over and over, impossible to translate cleanly. "I am the name you cut out." Sister Ellen stood. Her chains broke without sound. She walked forward slowly, deliberately toward the altar. The banner of Aspira trembled, though no wind moved. She placed her palm on the altar. Her hand left a print of black ash. Every vox channel across the convent fell silent. Then, through the dead channels, the voice again, not pleading, not threatening, counting down. The sisters rushed to restrain her. She did not resist. She merely smiled. Not her smile, Vera's dot. As the count reached 0, every lumen strip died. Darkness, only breath, only the faint sound of footsteps. One set, circling, no origin, no destination. A voice walking. After an eternity of heartbeats, the lumens returned. Sister Ellen lay prone, unconscious, scars darkened but intact. The altar bore a new fissure, a crack in the shape of a path leading outward, though no door lay there. The vox feeds were blank, not corrupted, clean. No record of what had happened. The memory was now only in the sisters' minds, and even that felt borrowed, as if already fading. The canoness gave no orders. She simply stared at the fissure. The convent was sealed, but something inside had become uncontainable. A voice had survived its body, and it was moving. Archdeacon Tarsus Fell believed in cartography, not of land, but of meaning. He had spent 31 years in the scriptoriums of Vervax, compiling what he called the God-grid lattice of holy sites, martyrdom coordinates, shrine world intersections, and sanctified voice. At first it had been devotional, then academic, and then something else. He noticed patterns. convents of the Adepta Sororitas were not placed at random, not even strategically. Some were built on dead worlds no fleet had touched in millennia. Some had no natural resources, no strategic value, no known founding records. They were positioned, a ritual geometry beneath tactical necessity. He began to overlay them, not just locations, but histories. When each convent had been founded, when the first saint's bone had been interred, when fire had first touched the altar, when the silence began, there was no logic, but there was structure, a shape that emerged not in space, but in relation. Convents across segmentum, obscurus, pacificus, tempestasol, aligned across veiled axes. Vel cross-referenced them against warp fluctuation zones, against pilgrimage paths, against astropathic harmonics. Each overlay grew colder, sharper, closer to something he could feel but not describe. He submitted his findings to the Ecclesiarchal Synod. He was ignored. His data marked theologically irrelevant. He resubmitted it with overlays of doctrinal echoes and incidents of silent relics, unsanctioned hymns, bleeding stones. Still ignored. Then he stopped submitting. He rented a data cell in the undercatacombs of St. Venere's Basilica. Not for prayer, for plotting. He covered the walls with parchment, then inked over the parchment with wax, then carved over the wax with brass styluses dipped in ash. He was not drawing maps anymore. He was revealing them. The shape grew, not symmetrical, not abstract. It looked, at first, like a wound, a tear rendered across stellar scale, then a sigil, then an eye, but not an eye, a gaze. He blinked. The room remained the same, but the image stayed burned behind his lids, not as light, as pressure. Something had noticed. He tried to stop. He burned half the parchments, smashed his data slates, recited blindfolded canticles for 14 days, drank an entire ampule of sacred oils and retched until he bled. But the shape returned, not in diagrams now, in dreams. He saw the convents as apertures, not buildings, not sanctuaries, iris structures, openings. He saw them blink, and in the space between blink's observation, Vel knew fear. He had studied martyrdom, watched sisters cut heresy from flesh with bolt and flame, but this was something else, not fear of death, fear of exposure. That he was no longer watching, he was being watched. He began to receive vox signals on a channel long disabled. They did not speak. They pulsed, 8 tones, then silence, then 8 again. He checked the records. 8 was the number of the first vow, taken in blood. The pulse was not electronic. It was respiratory. One night, his lumen failed. The chamber darkened. He turned and saw the shape, not on the wall, not in the air. Behind everything, it had always been there. Every convent, every chapel, every vault, every blade, every vow aligned. Not to protect the Imperium, to keep it looking away from what truly gazed back. The sisters knew, perhaps not consciously, but they felt it, that their silence was not obedience. It was insulation, that their wounds were not sacrifice. They were apertures, that their rituals were not remembrance. They were containment. He screamed once, short, enough to fracture the silence. The air responded. It grew still, so still that he heard his blood slowing. A line of scripture appeared across the wall, not written, condensed, as if the air was exhaling. Language. We listen to who watches. He knelt. His eyes wept ink, not black, transparent. He placed his hands on the floor and felt the rhythm, heartbeat not. His dot, not the planets, the grids. The convents were alive, together, not a network. A body. Vel collapsed. He was found days later, lips sewn shut with wax thread, palms branded with coordinate markings. When interrogated, he did not speak. He merely pointed toward no place on the map, but upward no. One ever traced the final alignment. The parchments were destroyed, or claimed to be, yet somewhere, on the edge of silence, a convent blinked closed, and the gaze it had once deflected remained watching.